I grew up in a small town called Tiksi, located on the shore of Laptev Sea in the Russian Arctic. I spent my childhood running in the tundra and watching northern lights on my way to school. But later life brought me to live in big cities, but I miss Arctic all the time. Most of my personal work is connected to North, perhaps because I long to spend time in the land I love the most. In 2018, I became a National Geographic Storytelling Fellow, and I dedicated a year to traveling. I wanted to look into the places that are remote and isolated on the shore of Arctic Ocean in Russia and see the changes that are happening in the region. In January last year, I went to visit a lighthouse and meteorological station called Kanyan Nos. It's located on the Kanyan Peninsula on the border of White and Barents Sea. When I saw it on the map, I thought, wow, this is a real-life story of living with a loved one on the edge of the world. And in fact, the lighthouse keepers are the young couple. It took me about 17 hours by snowmobile to get there, and I was practically frozen when I saw it in the distance. But it was beautiful and surreal, like Fata Morgana. The young couple that live at the lighthouse is Evgenia, we share the same name, and Ivan. They live alone with their dog named Dragon. Here they're collecting meteorological data every day, and here they're checking salinity of the seawater. Evgenia met Ivan when she went on vacation 2 years ago, and after a few months of dating, they fell in love, and she asked him to join her at the lighthouse. And he agreed without hesitation and left all the comforts of the city behind for her. I asked them, how do they manage not to get on each other's nerves? And Evgenia said, yeah, they argue sometimes, but you can't just slam the door and walk away in a blizzard. So they talk through their issues and make peace quickly. Fruit appreciated more than anything in the Arctic, and a simple apple can make someone really happy. So I brought some apples with me, and the first thing Evgenia did was to, one by one, carefully wrap them in the newspaper as if they were made of crystal. She did it so they wouldn't get frozen. Once a year, icebreaker ships deliver supplies to the station, and this is a little shack on the seashore. And Ivan got creative and wrote Kraj Zemlyi, which translates edge of the world, just in case the ship crew didn't know where they were. There is a little graveyard near the house. Here lies a family of lighthouse keepers who died of typhoid in the 1930s, and also seamen who died in a shipwreck in the waters around here. And Evgenia says that this graveyard is a constant reminder of her biggest fear, to get sick and not being able to get medical help. In case of emergency, they can call a helicopter, but because of the constant bad weather conditions, it can be delayed for months. Every day, Ivan and Evgenia look out into the sea to monitor sea ice. And this image reminds me of these delicate watercolors of first polar explorers that they put in their journals. It might look like a calm and peaceful scene, but in reality, the wind was roaring and raging around me. Perhaps you can only tell by the little ripples on the water. When Evgenia was a little girl, a family friend told her stories about her work in the Arctic, and she said this was the most happy time of her life. And when Evgenia was 19, she decided to go and try it and went to work at her first Arctic station. And she immediately thought that this is the right place for her. She's now 31 years old. She has this calm and dreamy personality. She spends her time reading books and collecting meteorological data and talking on the phone with her family. She calls her mom every day. Well, they don't use phone, they use WhatsApp. There is internet, but it's barely enough for voice call. But because there is not much things to discuss, not much news happening, she just asks her mom to put her phone on the voice, on the speaker, and she just listens to the sounds of her faraway home. In this beautiful day of blizzard, the house looked suspended in the air. And to me, it looked like Dorothy's house from The Wizard of Oz. For hundreds of kilometers, This house is the only island of warmth, and this courageous couple are the only humans in this frozen landscape. In the darkness of polar night in December, I went to visit town Dixon. In Soviet Union, they called it the capital of Russian Arctic, but now it is a ghost town. In its heyday, Dixon had about 2,000 inhabitants. It was an important seaport on the Northern Sea route and was a part of big Soviet dream of Arctic development and exploration. But after the fall of Soviet Union, Dixon became deserted. And finally, in 2013, the last house was abandoned. I spent 2 weeks in this town, wandering its dark streets, and I almost gave up any hope to make good images. But then aurora appeared in the sky one day, and it lit everything in these beautiful neon colors. And the town started to look as if it was from some dream, or more likely a nightmare. The lonely soldier on the main square started to look like Frankenstein. It's a monument to soldiers who defended Dixon against submarine attack during World War II. I wandered into this abandoned house and saw a piano in the room, and I imagined the music playing and stars sparkling in unison. It was a beautiful scene, but after a while I heard wind slamming the doors in the corridors and strange creaking sounds, and in my fuzzy imagination, I thought I heard someone's footsteps. It was really scary in this room. And when I was finished with the image and I was happy with it, I ran from there faster than I ever ran in my life. This is in the school classroom. Books are open as if the class is still going. Children who went to the school are probably all adults now, and they probably miss their little town. In this slide, somebody's forgotten doll looked like it will come to life and start running around like in one of those spooky films. This is a main street in Dixon. It used to be busy with people walking to work and grocery store, but now the empty windows are gaping with its darkness. And sometimes I felt like somebody was watching us from those windows, the uninvited visitors of the town. As aurora faded, Dixon started to slowly disappear in the darkness of the polar night, and finally it became invisible. People can put so much effort in building something so big and then just abandon it and forget about it as if it never happened. And there are so many towns like this in the Russian north, and perhaps there will be more once current projects won't be profitable anymore or once the resources are exhausted. Next trip brought me to Chukotka, to the village called Illumine. It's one of the most northern villages in Chukotka, located on the shore of Chukchi Sea. Partly because of its isolation, Illumine Chukchi community kept their traditions, and they still rely on land and the sea. The village was built in the 1950s by Soviet people, and most of the houses haven't been renovated since then. Elder Nikolai still remembers time when, before the Soviet people came and when they lived in family yarangas, the traditional house made of wood and reindeer skin. He says that his community lived in balance and people were happier and better than he says. Of course, they had to work hard for it, but he said that this was, the best time of his life. And this is the old photograph of one of the first airplanes that came to Chukotka. People were telling me stories about big Russian pilots bringing tasty treats and bringing them to visit their relatives in the neighboring villages. But outsiders also brought the most devastating thing to Chukotka, alcohol. Right now, Chukotka is #1 region in alcohol consumption in Russia, and this disease really destroys people's lives and causes violent conflicts and often suicides. This girl, Vika, she's rehearsing her dance for a celebration in the village. I've noticed that in the Nurmina, children are very attentive to animal behavior, and they can repeat their movements really well, and then they incorporate them in their dancing. There's a still life I stumbled upon in Hunter's Garage. And Nurmina community relies on the hunt, and walrus meat is one of the main means of their sustenance. They use traditional harpoons and guns. The annual quota for walrus hunt is 130 animals, and that's enough to sustain community through the long winter. Hunters try not to exceed quota, and they hunt walruses only when they're in the water. It's an honor to be a hunter, and they're really respected in the community. Sometimes when the weather is bad and they don't go hunting for a long time, some men get into drinking and start to look lost and depressed in the village. But then when they come out into the sea, I almost couldn't recognize them. They become this brave men with all their hunting instincts alert, attentive to all details. It's in their genes, and it has been for centuries. The biggest Pacific walrus rookery is located 15 kilometers from Nurmina. This summer, I spent a couple of weeks in the shack waiting for them to come out. And then one day, there was 100,000 walruses around us. And I couldn't come out from the shack because I didn't want to disturb the walruses. So I had only one angle, which worked out in the end. Because of the iceless sea, in past summers, walruses are not able to rest on the floating ice during their migration and feeding. So they all come out in this rookery, but there's simply not enough space for all of them. And sometimes they lay in 2-3 layers, and that causes suffocation and death of weaker animals and cubs. Hunter Grisha here, keeping a watch from brown bears when we went fishing, he says that this is the spot where his ancestors used to have their yarangas. Before Soviet collectivization, Chukchi used to live in their family yarangas, keeping distance from each other. And most of the villagers still remember those spots in the tundra. Hunters harpooned this whale far from the village, and night fell when we were coming back. We were tagging this beautiful animal, and everybody were quiet in the boat. Hunters were keeping tradition and were talking to themselves, asking the whale for forgiveness for taking its life, and explaining that it was done for the good of their people. I was sitting in the boat in total awe of the skillful hunters, but also really sad from the brutality of killing. I was amazed by the contrast of this land, this toughness, but at the same time, immense beauty. I was also thinking all the challenges that this community and other communities in the region had to endure in the past, and all the challenges that are coming and the uncertain future. As a storyteller, I keep coming to the Arctic because I'm really afraid that the land that I love and know and remember will soon change in a way that I won't be able to recognize it anymore. Thank you.
Please